Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge those of you who came out for Gardening Day. We have a monthly Gardening Day every month. Those of you who were at Gardening Day, would you be willing to stand so we can just acknowledge you? Yes. Vivian, Candace, Margaret, and Dave, and I saw pictures that, Margaret, you coerced several family members to be here as well. And from what I understand, Trudy was here too. I mean, Trudy usually can't come on Sundays, but she was here yesterday too. So, I want to thank you for that. And just usually it's the first Saturday of the month, but depends upon what's going on and whether there's a holiday and the like, okay? So, good morning. Have you ever wanted something to happen, and you wanted it to happen so bad, and it's not happening? Or have you found a plan, and you're married to your plan, and the plan is not unfolding the way you wanted it to? This is a very common human experience, right? Well, Carla and I, as many of you know, back in the 90s, we traveled doing prosperity seminars at Unity congregations, all over the country. We were up into Canada. Never made it down to Mexico for some reason, but at any rate, so for about 7 years there, we were traveling full-time doing these, and we actually came here in January 1992. Met the former minister, Ross Goodman, had dinner with Ross and his wife, Joan, and it was just a wonderful experience. And part of us traveling and visiting like 250 congregations, we took notes as to where we thought we might fit in, and this was one of those places. So I thought it was interesting how it just unfolded that we ended up here last year. But I kind of knew about 1988. I watched the Unity minister that Carla and I started out with in Chicago, Unity in Chicago. We started in like January 1987. And Mike Matoyan, a guy somewhat built like me, kind of looked and sounded like Ed Asner. And some people say it's one of my disadvantages is that I look more like a linebacker or a wrestler than I do, say, Ross Goodman, so as far as a Unity minister. But at any rate, I knew that I wanted to be a minister someday, and Carla had expressed that she wanted to be a minister someday. So I always kind of had this dream that Carla and I, would go through Unity seminary together and become ministers. And so the years were going by, and it's like about 7 years of doing these prosperity seminars, and finally in the summer of 1996, things began to shift, and Carla really recognized it early and talked to me and said, I think we should stop doing the seminars. And I was like, no, this is going so well. But I kind of felt it too. And, we booked out like 6 months, so to make that commitment like we did in, say, July of 1996, we were already booked into January of 1997, so. But then the question came, what next, and I knew. It's like, okay, well, we just need to apply to the seminary. And so you'd contact Unity Seminary up there near Kansas City, and they'd send you the packet, 36-page application. And you had to have your paperwork in by September 1st, and then they would let you know in January, or actually would let you know, I think like on December, no, that's right, it wasn't January, they let you know you needed to come in for oral interviews in April. And then after that, if they accepted you, then you needed to be ready to start right after the 4th of July. Well, you get this 36-page application for Carla and for me, and the paperwork's supposed to be in September 1st, so we're looking like 5 weeks worth of stuff. And I'm going through this, it's like, there are like 6 essays that I need to write, and then you have to find 3 Unity ministers who basically, send in an evaluation and recommend or not recommend you for ministry. And so I'm pushing for this. And Carla says to me, I don't know if I want to go to seminary right now. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And so I'm going to make this happen. And yet, as the weeks are going by, it's like, this just isn't going to happen. And so, what we hear so often in Unity is, are you willing to surrender to divine guidance? So in meditation, I was kind of like, okay, God, I'm beginning, show me. I mean, if this is what I'm supposed to do, fine. If not, I'll let it go. And the guidance I got was, well, now that you've, kind of are listening to the divine guidance, you will be a minister someday. And Carla will be a minister someday. And yes, you will go through seminary right now, but not now. Just be willing to do what it is you're guided to do other than seminary. And but then the question is like, well, how will I know it's time? And the feeling that I got was, well, what you'll know is that Carla will come to you and say, I think it's time we apply for the seminary. It's like, you mean I have to leave it in her hands and her whims? So, like I said, this was like, 1996, and the years were going by, and Carla kind of had this idea of, she wanted to go back into the business world and be a human resources manager like she always had before, but bring that new consciousness to it. And I kind of took the same attitude. I want to bring my consciousness into it. So I was a former radio TV journalist, so I went back and worked for a radio station, an all-new station in Chicago, and so that was kind of our thing. But the years are going by, and I'm beginning to kind of wonder. But I did do a pretty good job of letting go. Like saying Unity, the trick is, yes, you need to let go, but it's also nice if you can let go without leaving the fingernail marks behind. And then we had a really, really fascinating Christmas in 1998 with family and stuff like that, and people were just talking about what we, for 7 years that we were traveling doing the seminars and stuff like that. And it was around the middle of January that Carla came to me and said, let's talk. She says, I've really been feeling lately that you and I should apply for the seminary and go to the seminary. Now inside I'm like, but, I got to be cool. Oh, really? So we did apply, and of course, being January, we had plenty of time, to get stuff together to get the paperwork in, and sure enough, everything unfolded, and there we were, July 2000, starting the seminary there. Back then, it was 2 years. You just went straight through 8 quarters. Now it's 3 years and 9 quarters. But I kind of, in having that experience, just a sense of like, the other thing that we discovered was that each seminary class had its own kind of group personality. And we were with the right group. When we graduated in June of 2002, it was just obvious we were with the right group of people. There were 29 of us total. And then I'd start hearing about the personalities of the classes before us and from people who we knew who had gone through those classes. And I was like, this was the right time. This is what we call in Unity divine order. You affirm divine order when you're feeling stuck like that. And what that does is it allows the proper sequence of events to unfold in proper sequence. Because so many times we get this sense of like, I need to do this before this can happen. When in reality, the divine plan is like, no, you need to do this, and then this for this to happen. And lately, as many of you know, I just started here January of last year. And of course, I kind of had my plan, and having served 2 other congregations, I knew how to kind of unfold things and allow us to build mutual trust. And then suddenly last September, the proposal comes up, let's sell the building. And at the time, I was like, oh, hell no. That would ruin my plan. My plan to get things rolling here at Unity of Tampa. But, once again, sitting with, that's the right thing to do. And then, of course, we went through, holding the meeting in November and deciding to sell the building. And then, we had the annual meeting in January 20th, a total turnover of our 6 board members. And as we, so things were really rolling, though, and it's like, okay, as much as we tried to get this signed contract to sell the building, it didn't happen here until just a few weeks ago. And finally, we cut the deal with Chalmers and Company, and so we've got 6 months now for due diligence, and then we close. And in that meantime, we had several volunteers looking for buildings that we could buy, and there was this one building that I really preferred. And so, once we got the contract signed, and then we're trying to get the paperwork together for the line of credit because we had to wait for that contract to get the line of credit. And then the paperwork for that was all messed up. And then finally this week, it's finally coming together, the line of credit, and we get word that the building that I preferred has a contract on it. And I kind of chuckle with Carl. It's like, here I was getting caught up in that sense of like, this just isn't happening the way I want it to. Well, can I really let go of it? Now, as a lot of you know, I like to, dig into a Bible passage to kind of look at these practical lessons that we've got for how to live life, here in 2019. And Unity has this approach to the Bible. We recognize that Rather than literally, it's a book of symbolism. And anytime you have a narrative story in it, it's symbolism. And you just need to understand the symbolism. And there are many esoteric traditions like the Kabbalah that have carried that forward. And back in the 1920s, Unity actually facilitated a 10-year project to pull it all together from all of these traditions into the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. So, there are several places in the Gospel where it mentions like that Jesus can read minds and souls. That Jesus kind of knows what you need before you need it. Like the Gospel of John 2nd chapter, 23rd verse. That Jesus knows all men. Jesus is symbolic of that Christ consciousness that's available to us all, that basic spiritual awareness that we have in each of us, that we can turn to at any time. That's why it knows us. It's because it's right there within us. It knows every thought, every feeling, but there's that sense of free will that we need to have the opportunity to express the true nature of who we are through this bizarre personality we've chosen in this lifetime in this physical world. So, let's take a look at the Gospel of Matthew, 21st verse. Jesus went into the district of the cities of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But Jesus did not answer her at all. And his 12 disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away. She keeps shouting after us." He turned to her and said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, not the Canaanites." But she came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, help me." Jesus looked at her and said, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She looked at Jesus and said, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat from the crumbs from the master's table." Jesus then said, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And then her daughter was healed instantly. Looking at the story literally, it's a beautiful story, and of course it kind of follows that line of thought that Jesus was this wonderful healer, and that here he did this long-distance healing because there's no indication the daughter was there. But this woman had this all-consuming goal, and you can understand if you're a mother. Of course, I've been a mother in other lifetimes, and not this one. But yeah, you want your kid to be well and happy. And yet, and she's just and it's interesting because it's not a selfish want. It was just like, it's legitimate, it's unselfish, it's altruistic, but she's going to go to whatever length she had to make sure her daughter was healed, and she was being a pest to the disciples, and she was getting nowhere, and Jesus is ignoring her. Now, each of us has a spiritual gift of willpower. And what I'm noticing here is that she was using her willpower, but in an ineffective way. She was being willful rather than willing. So consider yourself in this story, like I was just describing for you before. It's like when I just, this is my plan. I've got my strategic plan, and it's not unfolding. And so we have something that we desire. Yeah, we have a right to have it, but for some reason it just isn't coming through. And we know where to go, but we get carried away with a willful attitude. Then something shifts, and we have that chance to really let go. So she steps forward, and instead of talking about what she wants and needs, she just says, "Lord, help me." And that's a very effective prayer. God, help me. God, help. I wish I could do that more often, but it's very powerful because it's saying, okay, I'm willing to follow the guidance that I'm going to get now. And it's interesting because in this Gospel of Matthew, in the previous chapter, we have Peter, and of course the 12 disciples. Peter represents faith. Peter gives the same prayer in a situation that he's in. Lord, help me. So, what I've noticed in my life is that I'll say, Lord, help me, but I've got this laundry list of what I want you to do and how to do it. This is how I want to see it unfold, rather than just really letting go. and saying, okay, if this is not the right way, what's the right way? Of course, a good thing to add to any prayer is, Lord, this is what I desire, this or something better. And allow that to happen. So, if Jesus represents spiritual awareness and this woman represents willfulness or willpower, she is constricting her faith by being willing rather than, being willful rather than willing. And of course, Jesus lobs this provocative statement to her. It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. The children are Israelites compared to... Now, back then in ancient Israel, the Canaanites and the Samaritans were shunned. It's like they do business with them, but it's just like that they were considered non-equals. So, and I know it's become fashionable for men to call each other dogs as a sign of brotherhood, and for women to call other women biatches to show their sisterhood. But I can assure you this was meant to be an insult. So how do you react when you're insulted? You recognize, don't take it personally. Is this really about you, or is it about this other person and what's going on inside of them? But Jesus lobs this into her, and there's almost that sense of an instant recognition within her that, yeah, I'm being too willful. I just need to get down on my knees and say, okay, help me, whatever it takes. There's a saying in spiritual circles, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? So one of our spiritual gifts, like I said, is willpower. It's an aspect of ourselves that gives us that gives the green light to a thought or a feeling that, okay, yes, I want to transform this into the physical world and see things happen. We are always connected to the divine mind. And in the divine mind, we have the opportunity to connect our mind to the divine mind and follow the guidance. We have decisions to make every day. And the first decision we have to make is, okay, am I going to get out of bed today? Just some of them are very simple decisions. Some of them are a little bit more complicated. But do we choose an action that allows for the highest good to unfold? Or are we just choosing something to be expedient? A willing person chooses the action that leads not only to his or her highest good, but to the highest good of everybody involved. A willful person tends to choose the action that is expedient rather than right, greedy rather than generous, hurtful or destructive. Willfulness also chokes off that expression of faith. Now, faith is that ability for us to say yes to the divine, yes to the spiritual essence within us, and be open to it. And if we don't, then we restrict that flow of the spiritual energies through our life, and we start to see a lack in our health, our occupation, our relationships, our finances, spiritual growth, and on and on. But, like I said, Jesus lobs this provocative question to her, and she says, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. She didn't take it personally. And also, though, what you see there is she's open once again to the flow of faith. So rather than being willful and just using willpower, it's like, okay, I'm going to use my willpower in combination with my faith and allow this to happen. And it's interesting because Jesus does something he very seldom does, and that is he praises her for her faith. And like I said, especially for a Canaanite or a Samaritan, these people who were shunned and sometimes hated by the Jews, it said something, and of course it said something to the Jews. It's like, isn't it interesting that this Samaritan or this Canaanite is doing this better than the Jewish people of which I'm a rabbi? Now, it's often said that Jesus healed many people, and we see this in various places of the Bible, but you see here, he didn't do the healing. She did the healing by shifting that attitude within her, that awareness within her. Jesus was the catalyst. So, let's dig a little deeper into the symbolism here. Like I said, all characters in the Bible represent aspects of ourselves. Every man represents a thinking nature. Every woman represents a feeling nature. It's a stereotype, but that's the way the symbolism is. And Jesus represents that presence of spiritual awareness in each of us. 12 disciples represent our 12 powers, our 12 spiritual gifts. Faith, strength, wisdom, love, power, imagination, understanding, will, order, zeal, renunciation, and life. For those of you who aren't familiar with the 12 powers, I've actually got a chart out there on the credenza you could take a look at the end of the service and take it with you if you wish. And then we dig into the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary and we find these cities of Tyre and Sidon. They're low-lying, so usually if something's higher, it means higher in consciousness, but it's also along the Mediterranean where you can catch fish, and fish represent a new idea. So, the Canaanites represent no spiritual awareness, just total focus on the physical world, no spiritual awareness. So, this woman, she's a female, she represents an emotion or a feeling nature. And when someone gives birth in the Bible or has a daughter or a son, it means they have given to a new generation or new derivation of that feeling nature. So she recognizes that she's not quite right and that her daughter, her offspring isn't quite right. And then she comes upon this spiritual awareness. And rather than thinking that she has to do it the way she's always done it, she has a shift. So within us, we have these emotions. What's your deepest, darkest secret? And have you noticed that there are aspects of yourself, our 12 powers, that are afraid to touch it or listen to it? And yet, when we have those old emotions or those old hurts, and we're willing to say, okay, I want to see this healed. And I'm willing to see this healed. And I'm willing to surrender to whatever it takes for that to happen. That's the symbolism of what happened here. And when the new emotion is healed, it's raised to a new level of consciousness. So when it comes to spiritual food and healing and all those things, we sometimes, assume that we need to find ourselves a 3-course meal. But sometimes all it takes is a few crumbs from the master's table. I'm going to have Duncan put up a slide of takeaways for the week, things for you to think about or ponder. Number 1, am I being tense with my preferences? Number 2, am I being willing or... I'm noticing I'm getting like a drop out here in my microphone. I don't know what's going on there. Have I awakened my faith? Here again, be willful, but also pair it with your faith. Have I opened to the divine guidance? And am I following through on that divine guidance? And then ask yourself the question, would I rather be right or would I rather be happy? I've got a video which shows a high school athlete who was faced with a decision and had to decide whether to be willing or willful.